Hi everyone, it's Jerry. This is Game 7 from the 2018 World Chess Championship match. The current champion Magnus Carlsen has the white pieces against Fabiano Caruana. Players are level going into Game 7, 3 points apiece. So let's dive in and see how this one played out. Opening wise, what do we have? It is a Queen's Gambit declined. We've been here before. Game 2 had this position and that position in this position. We follow Game 2 until move 10. Right here, something changes. Game 2 had Rook D1 on board. And after Caruana's Rook D8, that set Carlsen back in his seat, and yeah, eventually Black was even at some point a tiny bit better. So Game 2, Carlsen didn't get anything with Rook to D1. What does he try this time around? Knight D2. Okay, there's a serious threat connected with Knight D2. Knight B3. This isn't threatening to exchange knight for bishop. This is threatening to win the bishop. For example, if H6, Knight B3, Knight A4, the bishop goes. So Black sees this, of course, and drops the queen back to her home square. You can also go bishop e7. That's considered to be the most popular move in this position. Most games played with bishop e7. Another note behind knight d2 is that should there ever be a capture on c4, the knight will gladly recapture, throw a punch, be promoted, and focused on the weakest square in Black's camp, d6. So none of that. No capture on c4. Queen d8 in this game. Knight b3 still. And a decision for the bishop. Where exactly should the bishop go? In this game, it's bishop b6. Important not to go to e7. Computer will still say it's an okay move, but if bishop e7, rook d1 is a bit uncomfortable for Black. Right, when the rook is on d1, you want to get out of the pin, but if you do that, you might just be dropping a pawn. This can be uncomfortable. The queen is a bit short on squares, doesn't have a5, doesn't have c7, b6, she could be struck at possibly with knight a4. Running short on squares, the queen, a bit more cramped for Black. Right, the queen is not as uncomfortable as the Black queen currently. So bishop b6 keeps e7 open for the Black queen. Now from here, a tempting continuation for White is to play c5. I want to draw some attention to this. This is a move that you can see many players go for, possibly, to focus on the d6 square. So for example, c5, bishop c7, exchange of bishops. Doesn't this seem very good for White? Strong knight on d6. Well, it is not good for White. The knight would not be connected with any other white piece, and it can be undermined with b6. This is White's only good piece at the moment, but White has more important things to do, like complete development. Not a wise choice. Different story maybe if there's some more development in, and let's say the b pawn was up here, prepared to recapture and still support the knight. It's just not the case in this position. So while forceful, the c5, the captures, the knight b5 into d6, it's not good. So what does White do? In this game, it's bishop to e2. And, well, this was the first think, this moment right here, move 12. Another move that was likely considered is putting the rook on d1. Now, you could do that with rook d1 or even queenside castles. Though queenside castles, these two majors, same file. The rook is going to be on that c8 square soon enough. Probably not a good idea to queenside castle, but rook d1? Rook d1, how is black addressing this pressure against d5? This is a cool variation. Important for white to not go pawn grabbing. The reply would be queen e7. Star move in that position. Capture, capture, capture. You capture too much as white, you're losing. That would be a poison pawn. Keep in mind, white is behind development. This position is now wide open. Black can develop with tempo. Start to put some real pressure on the queen. There's already pressure on the rook, the knight. I'm going with this rook, by the way, to sidestep potential skewer. It would be a big problem for Team White to go for some pawn grab. So maybe something he assessed and knew, well, I'm never really threatening to capture on d5. Let me place an emphasis on kingside development. This is what we have. Move 12. Continuing queen e7. Bishop g5. Captures on c4. Can also consider an h6 move. I think you could immediately recapture if you're playing as white, or white could even consider capturing on d5 if you throw a question to the bishop. And this might be another, this was his first think, I would say, right at this moment. Move 13 for Caruana. Yeah, he'd shoot on this one for quite some time. I imagine h6 was another move he was considering along with rook to d8. This h6 move, there are in-between shots, capturing on d5, and if pawn takes, the knight will recapture, taking advantage of this pin. This is a pretty neat line, capturing on d5, capture on g5. And after here, considered best is to play queen to c7, immediately recapturing. White can focus on c5 with both knights and a queen. Considered best is queen c7, offering up a pawn just to have this monster bishop point at the heart of the kingside structure. It's considered even. Black playing with the bishop pair, bishops on adjacent diagonals, a pretty neat sequence. We don't have that. No h6 here. Instead, first releases the tension, resolves the tension in the center with this capture on c4. Now, the knee-jerk reaction is to immediately recapture with the bishop, but white looks to now reposition the knight on b3. Wasn't really a great piece there, and the c4 pawn is going nowhere. White intends to recapture with the knight. That way you can throw a nice punch. For as long as the knight is on b3 and the bishop is on b6, the bishop is really the superior piece with this arrangement. Not only offsetting the knight, but doing some more pressure on white structure. Okay, some repositioning. Hit twice, defended 0 on c4. There's no saving it. From here, knight e5. The way out of this pin should not be to play h6 and g5. This would be a far too committal move. Knight e5 looks to help out address this pressure. So now, just making a dummy move, just a passing move for white, a way out for white of this pin is to play h6, and now knight g6. Black only needs to control both g5 and h4 to get out of the pin. Knight g6 helps with that. So, that's nearby to address the pin. White on move, castles, move 15. Now there are a couple of variations I want to highlight here. Variations, these players likely ran the numbers on. They calculated this out. Potential structural changes. What am I referring to? Well, first of all, when knight e5 is played, it's played knowing that knight c4, knight c to e4, is not so dangerous for black. Right now, white it will be able to, with this move, instead of castles in the game, white will, with this move, be able to damage the kingside structure. And you could be sure Caruana has looked at this and determined, I'll be okay. What would the reply be after knight c to e4? Bishop d7? It would not be to babysit the pinned piece, because how would black ever complete development? It's difficult to see how you pull that off in a convenient way. Right? The knight and the pawn are in the way of the bishop. If you're not moving the bishop, what's that clown doing on the a8 square? The idea would not be to defend the pinned knight, but rather to get on with more development and remind white that if you don't pick up this pawn soon, you may never pick it up. With this last move, bishop d7, black is a step away from guarding it with the rook. So if I'm to carry it out and say damage the structure like this, there's a couple ways you could do it with the bishop or the knight. Let's just touch on one. If white follows up with this pawn may very well now be poison. White would be walking into a pin. Both players understood this. White got on with castles. What's the hesitancy with capturing on c4? Well, this move. You ready? One unprotected bishop. If you're capturing on c4, there is now a second. Queen c5 can follow. Black is the better side. Not winning, but definitely the better side. No reason to enter this variation as white. Bishop pair, better placed queen, and you don't have to go any further than that. Not a variation to go down. Castles on board. From here, bishop d7, not rook d8. A step away now is black to maybe secure this extra pawn. White still has to regain it. How does this come about? First, challenging the knight, a defender of c4. White really wants to throw this punch at the bishop and is successful, but there is this pin. Well, the pin is resolved. Knight g6, bishop g3, bishop c6, small improvement, and finally knight takes c4, only on this move 18. Bishop is saved, no knight captures, and from here we have the rooks getting on the open files. White is not afraid at this moment of a bishop captures bishop. It would be a different situation if this position was absent of light square bishops. So if rook d1 in this position, the move played in the game, if these pieces weren't on board, this would not be a good structure to enter for white, because the knight would have access to g4 and black can dream of drifting over here for checkmate. White would really need to have a knight all the way over here to defend against h2. But something to note, if the g pawns are doubled and the knight can get to that square safely, it's a structure to avoid. This structure is one to avoid. For now, white does just fine. Light square bishops on board, g4 covered. White does just fine keeping this tension between the dark square bishops. In fact, it is black who is the one who is inconvenienced some for as long as this tension remains. Note the defenders of each, a pawn for white, a queen for black. From here, rook f to d8. One rook off. Soon both rooks are exchanged. Queen recapturing. Staying on an open file. Knight d5, queen d4 with a punch. Knights are exchanged. Queen recapture. Only imbalance? Well, no imbalance. 4 to 4 on the kingside. 4 versus 4 on the kingside structure. 2-2 on the queen side. And yeah, no minor piece imbalances to speak of. If you do a knight comparison, white knight is a little bit better than the black knight. Bishop takes, h takes towards the center. Open file for the queen. And from here, bishop d3, looking for some imbalance. Bishop for knight exchange. Try to play knight for bishop. That happens in this game. First, it's b6. ruling out any possibility for knight a5, coordinating well now with the structure and the bishop. From here, f3, negating this bishop. It's no longer seeing g2. Backing up now is black. This right here may be a tempting move. In fact, after b6, why is white not trying to win the bishop? So, for example, white in this position played f3. Suppose the knight is captured. Can white not win the bishop with knight e5? What's the problem? Problem is black has a perpetual check. Queen d1, queen h5, and we repeat. This would result in a draw. So, there's no win of the bishop with this sequence. After f3, this starts to become a bit serious. To capture and play here, it's not it would not be a perpetual check in this case because the f3 pawn shelters, prevents the queen from getting to h5. But still, the knight getting into e5 with tempo against the bishop, the queen, pressure on f7, something to sidestep, so black does that. Gets the bishop out of the line of fire, tucks it away, b7 it is. We do have this exchange. Bishop takes knight, follow up e4. What is white looking to do? Focus on d6. So from here, queen c7. There's a punch on g3. That's defended with e5. And queen c5. I like this move. The knight will be challenged soon with bishop a6. During the game, I was pointing out bishop d5. It's a nice looking square, but it doesn't address a knight on d6. By inserting this check first, black demotes the king, forces the king away from the center, and only now do we have bishop a6, forcing a knight move, forcing a queen exchange. Note this position. If black immediately went in for bishop a6, this king would still be on the g1 square in this position. So if I'm just to go back right now, by not inserting this check and immediately going for this, the king is much better placed on g1 than h2. It wants to move towards the center in this endgame. The queen's off. So a useful check is what I'm getting at. King h2, bishop a6 only now. Why bishop a6 instead of bishop d5? Well, you can't really stop the knight from getting into d6. So you might as well try to control the knight. In particular, control the c8 square, because if the bishop was on d5 in this position, there would be the threat of knight c8. Winning a pawn, putting pressure on the a7, b6 structure. So from here, f6, f4, e5 is maintained so that the knight can be maintained. Nearby will be a king on e7, putting pressure on the knight. What does white do? After king f8, king g1, king e7, king f2, king d7, and from here we have king to e3. There are some thoughts of playing maybe g4 and then g5, but black will be able to fix a pawn on a light square one way or the other. g5 is considered a good move in this position. If takes, there's a capture like this, and the knight doesn't have that nice square on d6. And if we have this capture first, and then this one, well, you're going to have to do something with the knight right now. Knight e4 can be met with a capture on f4. These pawn advances for white on the king side aren't really amounting to much. In this game, we have king e3, and black immediately reminds white that this g2 pawn, the only one that can be subjected to pressure, sure enough has some pressure on it. Bishop f1 follows, move 37. Now, instead of bishop f1 in this position, suppose the king tries to get active. Would this be a moment for the white knight to hunt the g7 pawn. I didn't note this during the game, but going for something like this, knight e8, is not a good idea. Doesn't really amount to much. The black king can return to d7 without fear of knight takes g7. I don't know how valuable that pawn would even be anyhow. It is a doubled pawn. I just want to highlight what the issue would be capturing this pawn, or if you want to look at it as fianchettoing the knight, what's the issue? Well, a fianchettoed knight only has 4 squares, and this knight would officially be trapped. King is going to scoot on over and pick him up, and win. So it's a poison pawn, is what I'm getting at. It's one of the thoughts that comes to mind when I see a move like king c6. I think, well, that's the square that's given up. One of them. Can the knight go there? Not really in this case. Poison pawn. In this game, king e3 is played, bishop f1. White returns to f2 to defend g2, and the bishop returns. Is there some other try here after king to e3? Not really. You know, the king wants to be here, but it doesn't want to give up the g2 pawn. So at this stage, what we end up having is the position repeat. There really isn't a way forward in this endgame. The players at this moment, move 40, agreed to a draw. This game here was the most accurate one played to date. I'll show you what that looks like on the graph in just a moment, but I want to highlight, suppose both players tried to get aggressive like this. I know I was pointing out here it could be met with king to d7. Suppose we have this. Both kings trying to get as active as possible. Well, again, I think in this position there's going to be bishop to f1. So let's run it like this. Suppose at this moment king c6, before king here, there's c4. Well, black would establish a strong position before white can get there. And now there's pressure on c4. If the king scoots over to defend, the position can be shut down some on the king side with f5, and there's even b5 nearby, simplifying some, and this turns out to not get anywhere either. A structural change, let's say king c3 and b5, a capture, bishop captures. This is still a drawn position, nothing great happening here. Black may even be the better side if white chooses to exchange minor pieces like this. As it would be the black king who's able to put pressure on a white pawn and set white into a defensive state. It's not a variation for white to go down. There's no great progress here. It's difficult to see how that would even be the case. Stronger king position for black. Fourth rank king versus a third rank king. So there's really nothing to play for in this endgame. We end up having the position repeat some. King f2, last move, move 40. Another draw on board, and as mentioned, the most accurate game played in this match to date. So having a look at the tail of the tape on this one, let's see where we stand. In the end, no inaccuracies, mistakes, or blunders for either side. I keep saying it again and again. I'm sure if you're following this, the videos I'm putting out on YouTube, I mean, they're machines, and it's crazy to see an average semi-pawn loss of 5 and 4, and they are that good. It's really amazing. I mean, how much longer will they be able to keep it up here with this level of play? We're going to find out, because at some point you can be sure one of these two players will fall. So the chess world is still waiting for that moment. Aside from game 1, where there was some definitely a realistic chance for a win by Carlsen, games 2 through now game 7 have been super close. So anyhow, As usual, feel free to leave any feedback to this video in the comment section below. We remain level 3.5 points apiece now after this game 7. So again, feel free to leave any feedback in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video and maybe took a thing or two away. That's all for now. Take care.